She was a princess who wanted one thing, to marry for love, just once, in a world that treated women like bargaining chips. And the man she chose repaid her with the coldest kind of betrayal, the kind that arrives with a wedding ring. Hi everyone, welcome back. If you love the hidden love dramas behind royal headlines, tap like, subscribe, and settle in, because this story is not a fairy tale. It is Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's sister, and the dangerously charming man who kept surviving everything, Charles Brandon. Picture Tudor England, glittering tournaments, velvet sleeves, gold chains, and underneath it all, a brutal rule. A royal woman's heart did not belong to her. It belonged to alliances, treaties, and a brother who could turn affection into a command. Charles Brandon was born in 1484, not into the kind of security that produces dukes. His father died at Bosworth in August 1485, carrying Henry VII's standard, and heroism did not come with a fortune. By 1494, Brandon was an orphan, no parents, little money, no great title waiting in the wings. Most men in that position vanish into the margins. Brandon did not. He learned the first lesson of court life early. If you cannot inherit power, you have to charm it into giving you a seat. When Henry VII died in 1509 and the young, athletic Henry VIII took the throne, Brandon's luck turned into a strategy. The two men bonded over jousting, risk, and the thrill of being watched. Henry loved companions who fed his confidence, and Brandon had the talent to make the king feel brightest in the room. He even knew when to lose against Henry, not clumsily, but gracefully, just enough to flatter the king. Rewards followed fast. He was knighted. He became a Knight of the Garter. In 1513, he was made Viscount Lisle, and in February 1514, the court watched in open disbelief as the former orphan became Duke of Suffolk. Foreign diplomats whispered that he was the second king. And here is where the story darkens, because Brandon's rise was not only built on tournaments and friendship, it was built on women and on a legal system that let powerful men treat vulnerable girls as assets. Before Mary Tudor ever looked his way, Brandon had already left damage behind him. He fathered a child with Anne Brown and then stepped away when commitment threatened his ambitions. He married her wealthy aunt, Margaret Mortimer, sold off her property, and then annulled the marriage, leaving her to fight for years to recover what she could. Later, he returned to Anne, married her, and had 2 daughters. Anne died young, and Brandon was free again. Then he set his sights on Elizabeth Grey, a child heiress, and became her guardian while arranging a future marriage contract. Guardian first, husband second. The pattern is the point. Brandon understood how to convert female vulnerability into male advancement. Now shift to Mary Tudor, born in 1496, the youngest sister of Henry VIII. Mary grew up at court, loved for her beauty and warmth, and used by her brother for diplomacy. In 1514 she was 18, and Henry decided she would marry Louis XII of France, a man in his 50s. It was politics. It was leverage. For Mary, it was a personal humiliation. Mary obeyed and went to France. Louis died on the 1st of January, 1515, only 3 months after the wedding. Overnight, Mary became a wealthy dowager queen with something rare, a second chance. Henry knew what that meant. A young widow with royal blood could be traded again. So he sent Charles Brandon to France to bring her home quickly, before the French court could arrange another marriage. And he gave a clear command: escort her, do not marry her. In Paris, Mary made a decision that felt like bravery. In mid-February 1515, Mary Tudor and Charles Brandon married in secret, reportedly with the new French king, Francis I, willing to tolerate it. It was treason. It was direct disobedience. It could have cost Brandon his head and destroyed Mary's standing forever. When Henry heard, he raged. Brandon's response was revealing. He claimed Mary pushed him into it, that her tears and pressure left him no choice. It is a convenient story, especially for a man with a history of walking away when women cried. So ask yourself, was this love, or was it opportunity dressed up as romance? Mary was rich. Her French jointure, the widow's income from Louis, was enormous. She was a king's sister. Marriage to her pulled Brandon into the royal family, and any children they had would stand close to the line of succession. Affection may have been real. Advantage was undeniable. Mary also had her own reason to move fast. Henry had once promised her that if she became a widow, she could choose her next husband. But Mary had just lived through the reality of royal promises. She had been sent to a foreign bed for politics. She understood that if she returned to England unmarried, she would become a prize again, offered to the next useful alliance. In that light, the secret wedding was not only romance, it was self-defense. It was Mary trying to lock her choice in place before her brother could rewrite it. When they returned to England in April 1515, they needed protection. Wolsey helped, and Henry agreed to forgive them, but he charged them for it in a way that made sure they would never forget who owned the final word. He took the jewels Louis had given Mary. He seized large parts of her dowry. He demanded a yearly payment of £2,000 for 12 years from her French income. A portion of that went straight to settling a debt Brandon already owed the king. And then came the most crushing leash of all, a bond of £100,000, a sum so huge it was meant to terrify them into lifelong obedience. Mary had married for love and instantly discovered the price tag. The crown did not just punish her, it kept charging her year after year. On the 13th of May, 1515, they married publicly in England, with Henry and Catherine of Aragon present. It looked like a royal blessing. It was also a reminder that their happiness existed only by the king's permission. For a while they retreated to the countryside and started a family. Their children arrived. A son named Henry was born in March 1516 but died young. A daughter, Frances, arrived in July 1517. Another daughter, Eleanor, followed. A second son, also named Henry, was born in 1522. And then the mood changed. There were no more children after that. Mary was still young, yet the marriage cooled into something transactional. Letters show Mary begging her brother about money, insisting she had not received even a small portion of what she believed was hers. In one plea, she complains that she has not had so much as a single coin from her own dowry. Imagine it, a former Queen of France pleading for what amounts to pocket change, because her husband controlled the purse, the jewels, the household, and the decisions. The woman who defied a king for love became trapped inside her own marriage. And Mary was not only fighting money, she was fighting humiliation. Brandon was widely believed to have been unfaithful during their marriage. There are records, and later reports, that he fathered at least 2 illegitimate children while Mary was still alive. To a Tudor husband, this could be shrugged off as male privilege. To a Tudor wife, especially a royal one, it was a public reminder that her sacrifice did not buy her safety. Mary had risked treason for this man, and he still behaved as if her feelings were optional. That is the emotional trap at the center of her story. Mary broke the rules to choose him, and then discovered that breaking rules does not magically change who a man is. Mary also outranked Brandon, and that rank never went away. At events, she was still the French queen. Gifts were sent to her, dignitaries visited her. For a man who had climbed his whole life, that public imbalance must have been hard to swallow. Still, Brandon stayed close to Henry. He showed up, entertained, served, and survived. Henry's affection protected him again and again, even when other men fell. Henry also used the debt like a collar. It kept Brandon careful. It kept him away from court for stretches, quieter than he might have been otherwise. But Brandon never disappeared completely. He was present at spectacular moments, including the Field of Cloth of Gold in 1520, where Henry met Francis I in a blaze of luxury. He still jousted, still played the role of the king's confident companion. In March 1524 came a reminder of how fragile Brandon's safety really was. During a joust, Henry forgot to lower his visor, and Brandon's lance splintered against the king's helmet. Henry could have died in front of the whole court. If he had, Brandon's closeness to the throne could have been twisted into suspicion. Instead, Henry forgave him again. That is how deep the bond ran. By the early 1530s, England was tearing itself apart. Henry wanted out of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Anne Boleyn rose. Mary and Brandon disliked Anne, and Mary refused to play the eager courtier. At the same time, Mary's health worsened for years, and by 1533 she was seriously ill. She was 37, still young, and her body was failing. Now comes the part that makes this story feel almost unbearable. In the Brandon household lived Catherine Willoughby, a wealthy heiress who had been Brandon's ward since childhood. She was close in age to his daughters. She had been contracted to marry Brandon's son, the Earl of Lincoln. She was supposed to become Mary's daughter-in-law. She called Mary Mother, and while Mary lay ill, Brandon grew close to Catherine. There were rumors, reported by foreign observers, that hinted at something improper. We cannot prove every detail, and Tudor gossip was often weaponized. But we do not need the worst rumor to understand the reality that follows, because what Brandon did next is documented. Mary Tudor died on the 25th of June 1533, a queen in her own right, a princess of England, gone at 37. It was a grand funeral with torches and ceremony, and by custom her husband and brother did not attend. 6 weeks later, Brandon did the unthinkable. He cancelled his son's engagement to Catherine Willoughby. Then on the 7th of September 1533, the very day Princess Elizabeth was born, Charles Brandon married Catherine himself. Catherine was 14, Brandon was 49. Let that land without excuses. A girl prepared to marry his son became his wife instead, almost immediately after Mary's death. The woman who had fought her brother for love was replaced in weeks by a teenager who had lived under her roof. If you have ever looked back on a relationship and thought, how long was he planning his next life while I was still living mine? Mary's story hits like a punch. Mary's final choices suggest she understood. As she was dying, she changed her will and directed many personal belongings away from Brandon. It reads like a quiet refusal, a last attempt to stop him from turning her death into profit. He did not need her jewels. He had already secured the greater prize, a rich young heiress, now legally his wife. Then tragedy layered itself on top of cruelty. In March 1534, Brandon's young son, the Earl of Lincoln, died. The boy who had been promised Catherine Willoughby was gone, and Brandon faced no angry heir inside his household. And yet Brandon still survived, right through the rest of Henry's reign, because he understood something dangerous. Henry did not always reward the cleverest politician. He rewarded the man who made him feel powerful, remembered, adored. Brandon was that man. So what are we meant to do with Mary Tudor's story? It is tempting to call her reckless, to say she chased romance and paid for it. But Mary was not only a woman in love. She was a woman negotiating the narrowest choices available in a system designed to trade her body and her future. Her secret marriage was a gamble for autonomy. The tragedy is not that Mary believed in love. The tragedy is that she believed a man like Brandon would protect the freedom she fought for. Because Brandon's pattern is painfully consistent, he sought women who could move him upward, whether through money, title, or proximity to the throne. When love and advantage aligned, he accepted love. When love threatened advantage, he stepped over it. Mary's fairy tale did not end with a kiss. It ended with debt, illness, and a husband who replaced her with a girl she had treated like family. If you want, in the next video we can follow what happened to Mary's daughter Frances and how this marriage rippled into the next generation right up to Lady Jane Grey. Until then, subscribe for more Tudor love dramas that history tried to dress up as romance. And tell me in the comments, do you think Brandon ever truly loved Mary? Or was she always the most valuable step on his climb?